first passage is going to be Genesis chapter 1, verse 14 through 18. Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 through 18. And it's just going to talk about, we know what the signs, what all the lights in the heavens are for. We're just going to confirm this through Scripture. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night. And let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. Okay, so here it's clearly showing that everything we see in the sky is for day and the night, is for signs, seasons. And when it says signs, that just means what time of the year it is. That's not astrology or fortune telling, witchcraft or anything. That's simply mainly for time, you know, for seasons, for days, and for years. So we can tell the seasons by the heavens, also by the environment, what happens. There's other passages in the Bible that let you know what seasons you're in, particularly dealing with seasonal harvests. For days and for years. So obviously the moon lets us know when months are starting. Moon and month basically are synonymous. They basically go together. We get the word month from moon. You know the day by the rising and the setting of the sun. Well, mainly by the setting of the sun. That's how you know the days. And obviously you know day and night by the sun and the moon. And when you calculate your months, then you can calculate your years. So let's continue on. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide light from the darkness. And God saw it was good. So that basically lays out the creation of what we call in the heavens. So the greater light that rules over the day obviously is the sun. The lesser night that rules over the night is obviously the moon. So all of these things in the sky affirm the appointed times and seasons, days and years that we're in. So Genesis just laying out the order and the structure of things as far as creation and their purpose. So let us now go to Psalm, the 104th Psalm, verse 19. This one's just going to be a one-hitter quitter. The 104th Psalm, verse 19. Oh, and also this will be uploaded to the YouTube page if you ever want to catch it in the playback. And I will give you the passages in the description box of the video so you can follow along. 101st Psalm, verse 19. He appointed the moon for seasons. The sun knoweth his going down. So that tells you right there, the moon lets us know the seasons. We can calculate the moon by the months. From there we can build our calendar. The sun divides the day and the night. We know what all these things are for. This is simply confirming what we already have in creation in Genesis. So now let's go to Colossians chapter 2, verse 16 through 17. Colossians chapter 2, verse 16 and 17. Now this is Paul writing here. Let no man therefore judge you in meat, or in drink, or in respect of an holy day, or the new moon, or the Sabbath days. Okay, now let's pay attention here to what it's saying. We're not so much going to focus on the meat and the drink part, we're going to focus on the days. So, or in the respect of a holy day, or the new moon, or the Sabbath days. So if you read in Exodus and Leviticus the 23rd chapter, you're going to read the feasts and the holy days, the Sabbaths and the high Sabbaths of the Lord. So here it breaks down 3 types of days. You have Sabbath days. Now there's your weekly Sabbath. You have your weekly Sabbath, regular Sabbath, and you have your high Sabbaths, which is what we're in today, the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And you have other holy days, and then you have new moon. Well, the beginning of the month is a new moon. But also in the first day of the Feast of Trumpets, that is also a Sabbath. It's a high Sabbath, and it's a holy day. But here it's specifying holy days, or the new moon, or Sabbath days. So it's laying down these different days for you. So this is in the time of Paul writing this. So if he only wanted to talk about feast days or holy days and Sabbath days, why also add in the new moon if that's simply the first day of the Feast of Trumpets? Because that's a high Sabbath and it's a holy day. But here it's specifying holy day, new moon, and Sabbath days. And let's finish this out with 17. Which are a shadow of things to come, but the body is of Christ. Okay, and we're going to get to that, a shadow of things to come. So all that's saying is that, and this isn't going to be a lesson breaking down all the feast days, the holy day, the holy days, the Sabbath, why it is the way it is. But all of these things are a shadow to things to come. Okay, there's a purpose and there's a reason for all of these feasts and these holy days and Sabbaths. We don't do them simply as customs or rituals. We do them for reason and for purpose. They mean something. Okay? So they were done before, and it's also telling us a shadow of things to come, and it's going to be done in the future. And we're going to lay this out like the title of this lesson, past and future. So remember that shadow of things to come as we're reviewing through. Now let's get into the past. We're going to show you Israelites, our ancestors, keeping new moon in the past. Let's go with the book of Numbers. We're going to have a couple of passages from the book of Numbers. Let's go to Torah. We're going to start with Numbers chapter 10, verse 10. Numbers chapter 10, verse 10. This is going to also be a one-hitter quitter. Also in the day of your gladness, and in your solemn days, and in the beginning of your months. Well, beginning of your months, that's the first day of a month. And if you know from the biblical calendar, what some people, I guess they might call it a lunar calendar, but we know it's a biblical calendar. We know it's the calendar of the Lord. The beginning of your month is the new moon. A new moon signifies the beginning of the month, okay? And calculating the new moon is the same way we do for any other time for the biblical calendar. So, and in the beginning of your months, you shall blow with trumpets over the burnt offerings and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings, that they may be to you for memorial before your God. I am the Lord your God. Now on the sacrifice and the offerings part, we know we don't do that anymore because Christ is our sacrifice. He was our offering for our sins. So we're not going to do the sacrificial part. That part has been suspended for now. But it's saying blow your trumpets for your offerings. Now it's not saying blow the trumpet in the 7th month, the first day of the 7th month, which is the beginning of the Feast of Trumpets. It says in the beginning of your months. That's plural, not singular. It doesn't say in the beginning of your 7 months. So that would seem to mean all of your months. So all of the beginning of your months, all of the new moons, blow your trumpet. So it's something, and that this is a memorial before God. Okay? So it seems that there's something to this beginning of a month, the first day of a month. Let's now go to, still going to be in Numbers, let's go to the 28th chapter. Numbers 28th chapter, verse 11. Numbers 28th chapter, verse 11. And in the beginning of your months ye shall offer a burnt offering unto the Lord, 2 young bullocks, and 1 ram, 7 lambs of the first year without spot. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, wait a minute, forgive me. Got ahead of myself. Okay, Numbers chapter 28, we're going to do verse 9 through 11. Numbers chapter 28, verse 9 through 11. And on the Sabbath day, 2 lambs of the first year without spot, and 2/10 deals of flour for meat offering, mingled with oil, and the drink offering thereof. And once again, we don't do these types of offerings and sacrifices anymore. Those things have been suspended. Jesus made that offering for us. This is the burnt offering of every Sabbath, beside the continual burnt offering and his drink offering. And then when we get to verse 11, that's and in the beginning of your months, ye shall offer a burnt offering unto the Lord, 2 young bullocks, and 1 ram, 7 lambs of the first year without spot. So once again, it's also laying out the beginning of your months. It doesn't specifically say the 7th month. It says the beginning of your months. We don't do the sacrifice part, but once again, there's something significant about the beginning of a month, a new moon. Okay, so let's now go to Amos. Book of Amos, 8th chapter. Book of Amos, 8th chapter, verses 4 through 6. Book of Amos, 8th chapter, verse 4 through 6. Hear this, O ye that swallow up the needy, even to make your poor of land to fail, saying, when will the new moon be gone, that we may sell corn, and the Sabbath, that we may set forth wheat, making the ephah small, and the shekel great, and falsifying the balances of deceit, that we may buy the poor for silver, and the needy for a pair of shoes. Yea, and sell the refuse of the wheat. So particularly here in verse 5, when will the new moon be gone, that we may sell corn? So here, if you can't sell corn, you can't buy corn, so that's no buying or selling, no commerce. And it talks about the new moon. Now, in the first day of the Feast of Trumpets, we know that this is the case. But it seems like that this is more than maybe just that one time. If it's all of the new moons, all the beginning of the month. Then it also specifies, and the Sabbath, that we may set forth wheat. Now here they're talking about not only just doing business, but they're talking about doing shady business. Making the ephah small, so that's making your quantities low or small or short. And the shekel great, that means price gouging. Exorbitant prices. So they want to give you low quantities of good and higher prices, and falsifying the balances by deceit, so giving false weights and measures. So we know on the weekly Sabbath you're not supposed to buy or sell, do any work. Specifically the high Sabbaths, you're not supposed to buy or sell. But if this new moon is also talking about the beginning of your months, the first month, and if they can't sell corn, well, you can't sell corn, you can't buy corn. So that also means no buying or selling, no commerce, no mercantile affairs. Now let's go to Ezra, 3rd chapter, verse 1 through 6. So like I said, it seems that there's something a bit set apart with the new moon, with the beginning of a month. chapter 3, verse 1 through 6. Now this one is going to particularly talk about Feast of Trumpets, but then there's another passage here. And when the 7th month was come, and the children of Israel were in the cities, the people gathered themselves together as one man to Jerusalem. Then stood up Jeshua, the son of Josadak, and his brethren the priests, and Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and his brethren, and builded the altar of the God of Israel, to offer burnt offerings thereon, as it is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. And once again, the sacrifices part we don't do. Verse 3. And they set the altar upon the bases, for fear was upon them because of the people of these countries. And they offered burnt offerings thereon unto the Lord, even burnt offerings morning and evening. Now let's go to verse 4. They kept also the Feast of Tabernacles, so this is later on in that month. They kept also the Feast of Tabernacles, as it is written, and offered the daily burnt offerings by number, according to the custom, as the duty of every day required. And afterward offered the continual burnt offering, both of the new moons, and all of the set feasts of the Lord that were consecrated, and every one that willingly offered a freewill offering unto the Lord. From the first day of the 7th month begin they to offer burnt offerings unto the Lord, but the fountain of the temple of the Lord was not yet laid. Okay, so this is when tens of thousands of Israelites were coming back out of, I guess, more direct captivity of the Medo-Persians back into the land. First temple had been destroyed. Second temple had not yet been rebuilt yet. So the people started keeping the feast yet again. And we're going to focus on 4 and 5. So we know that they start keeping the Feast of Trumpets in the 7th month. And they made an altar for that. Then we get to the Feast of Tabernacles, which is later on that month. They also were keeping that. And then it says, afterwards they offered continual burnt offerings. Now here it says, both of the new moons and all the set feasts of the Lord that were consecrated. So 7th month, new moon of the 7th month, that's the Feast of Trumpets. The month continues to roll on, then we get to the Feast of Tabernacles. But now it says, both of the new moons and all of the set feasts. Well, we know that the first day of the 7th month is a new moon, and that's the first day of the Feast of Trumpets. Okay, the memorial blowing of trumpets. So why is it saying here, both of the new moons and all the set feasts? Because trumpets is a feast. So if you're saying a new moon and all of the feast, I mean, all of the feast includes the memorial blowing of trumpets. Okay? So why once again, why is it specifying here in the 5th verse, chapter 3 Ezra, why is it specifying both of the new moons, like continuing to observe, you know, the new moons and the new month, the beginning, and also the set feasts? And then to finish it out with verse 6, excuse me, from the first day of the 7th month begin they to offer burnt offerings unto the Lord. So starting then all the way down. So it seems like that there's more going on here than simply just the Feast of Trumpets. Okay. So let us now go to Nehemiah chapter 10. Nehemiah chapter 10, and this is in the same time period, if you know, because the book of Ezra and the book of Nehemiah basically kind of go together, almost like a part 1, part 2. Nehemiah chapter 10, verse 32 and 33. Nehemiah chapter 10, verse 32 and 33. Also we made ordinances for us to charge ourselves yearly with the third part of a shekel for the service of the house of God, for the showbread, and for the continual meat offering, and for the continual burnt offering, of the Sabbaths, of the new moons, for the set feasts, and for the holy things, and for the sin offerings, to make an atonement for Israel, and for all the work of the house of God. So, I believe the second temple by this time is maybe built, but here we go once again. Okay, now, obviously we don't do the sacrifices and the offerings and showbread and things like that anymore, but it's breaking everything down. It says Sabbaths, new moons, set feasts, and for the holy things. You know, when you're talking about new moon, if you're simply only talking about the first day of the Feast of Trumpets, the memorial blowing of trumpets, why are you saying set feasts, Sabbaths, and new moons? You know, it's breaking everything down, listing it individually. So it appears that something about this new moon, keeping an observance of the new moon, stands out. And now let's go to Hosea or Hosea, however you prefer to pronounce it. Chapter 2, verse 10 and 11. Hosea, chapter 2, verse 10 and 11. And now will I discover her lewdness in the sight of her lovers, and none shall deliver her out of mine hand. I will also cause her mirth to cease, her feast days, her new moons, and her Sabbaths, and all her solemn feasts. So, this is a prophet prophesying to the children of Israel because we had done wickedly and we did not keep the Lord's charge. So the prophet is telling you what's going to happen for this spiritual adultery and spiritual fornication. Once again, here it's specifying and it's breaking down through a prophet that because you are transgressing, I'm going to make cease your feasts, your new moons, your Sabbaths, and all your solemn feasts. You know, so why is the new moon specifically listed separate and not included with feasts or Sabbaths? You know, consider the fact that you have regular Sabbath, weekly Sabbath, and also high Sabbaths. And okay, let's now go to 1 Chronicles. 1 Chronicles chapter 23. Chronicles chapter 23, verse 28 to 32, ending out the chapter. 1 Chronicles 23, verse 28 through 32. Because their office was to wait on the sons of Aaron for the service of the house of the Lord, in the courts and in the chambers, and in the purifying of all holy things, and the work of the service of the house of God, both for the showbread and for the fine flour for meat offering, and for the unleavened cakes, and for that which is baked in the pan, and for that which is fried, and for all manner of measure and size, and to stand every morning to thank and praise the Lord, and likewise at even, and to offer all burnt offerings unto the Lord in the Sabbaths, in the new moons, and on the set feasts, by number, according to the order commanded unto them, continually before the Lord, and that they should keep the charge of the tabernacle of the congregation, and the charge of the holy place, and the charge of the sons of Aaron, their brethren, in the service of the house of the Lord. So once again here, I'm going to stress this every time, we don't do the sacrifices and the offerings anymore. That's suspended. But once again, here it lists new moons, set feasts, Sabbaths, by number, according to the order commanded unto them. You know, so why are we specifically highlighting new moons? And previously in Torah, in those two passages in Numbers, it talks about taking a time of observance in the beginning of your months. And I know it doesn't specifically lay it out in Torah, say Leviticus 23 or in Exodus, but it's there in Numbers. You know, so why are you observing the beginning of your months there? And then we see it throughout the Tanakh, throughout the Old Testament. So we're going to go over to now 2 Chronicles. We're going to have three passages here. The first one, 2 Chronicles chapter 2. 2 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 4. 2 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 4. Behold, I build an house to the name of the Lord my God, to dedicate it to him, and to burn before him sweet incense, and for the continual showbread, and for the burnt offerings, morning and evening, on the Sabbaths, and on the new moons, and on the solemn feast days of the Lord our God. This is an ordinance forever to Israel. So now here it's saying this is an ordinance forever, okay? Specifically laying out Sabbaths, new moons, and solemn feasts. You know, so I understand the significance of the memorial of the blowing of trumpets and that feast, those 7 days, but why is it specifically specifying new moons from everything else? So now let's go to chapter 8. I'm going to stay in 2 Chronicles for a little bit. 2 Chronicles chapter 8, verse 12 and 13. Now this is the time of Solomon. Then Solomon offered burnt offerings unto the Lord on the altar of the Lord, which he built before the porch, even after a certain rate every day, offering according to the commandment of Moses, on the Sabbaths, and on the new moons, and on the solemn feasts, 3 times in the year, even in the feast of unleavened bread, and in the feast of weeks, and in the feast of tabernacles. So here we have the temple is now built in the time of Solomon. Here's the 3 times of the year that none of the men of the families, none of the men of Israel should have come up to the Lord's holy house empty-handed. You know, those 3 times, unleavened bread, feast of weeks, of first fruits, and in tabernacles. But then it's also talking about on your Sabbaths, your new moons, and on the solemn feasts. You know, now of course the regular Sabbath, weekly Sabbath, that's not those 3 times a year, and you have high Sabbaths that aren't necessarily those 3 times a year either. Same thing when it says solemn feasts. Not all of the feasts or those holy days are those specific 3 times of the year. And if you're talking about new moons, the beginning of your months, the first month of every year, the first day of every month, then that's more than 3 times a year. So once again, why is it here? laying out through the prophets, and historically, why is it laying out new moons as it's something that needs to be emphasized as different than the other feasts that we see in Exodus and Leviticus 23. And then in Numbers it talks about observe the beginning of your months, which is a new moon. And it doesn't specifically say the 7th month, it says the beginning of your months. Now the last one in 2nd Chronicles, let's go to the 31st chapter. Second Chronicles 31st chapter, verse 1 through 3. 2nd Chronicles 31st chapter, verse 1 through 3. Now when all this was finished, all Israel that were present went out to the cities of Judah, and brake the images in pieces, and cut down the groves, and threw down the high places and the altars out of all Judah and Benjamin, and Ephraim also and Manasseh, until they had utterly destroyed them all. Then all the children of Israel returned, every man to his possession, into their own cities. And Hezekiah appointed the courses of the priests and the Levites after their courses, every man according to his service, the priests and the Levites for burnt offerings and for peace offerings, to minister, to give thanks, and to praise in the gates of the tents of the Lord. He appointed also the king's portion of his substance for the burnt offerings, to wit, for the morning and evening burnt offerings, and the burnt offerings for the Sabbaths, and for the new moons, and for the set feasts, as it is written in the law of the Lord. Okay, so this is in the southern kingdom. Southern kingdom was better than the northern kingdom, but still inconsistent. You had good kings and bad kings back and forth. Here we have Hezekiah. So they cut down all of the graven images and all the idols, the groves, all of the high places where Israel was committing all kinds of abominations. And they got back to our God. So he reestablished, or refocused the Levitical priesthood, all the priests, to do what was right according to how they were supposed to do it. And they got back to making sacrifices and oblations unto the God of Israel, particularly for what they had done. So the same thing here. It's specifying again Sabbaths, new moons, and set feasts. So it seems like this new moon is standing out. Now that's all of the passages, that's all the scripts we have for the past. So we see it done here in the past. We see a mentioning of this and something special about the beginning of a month in the past. Let's go to a few passages. Well, actually, one more for in the past. It's Book of Isaiah, chapter 1. Book of Isaiah, Book of Isaiah chapter 1 verse 13 and 14. Book of Isaiah chapter 1 verse 13 and 14. Bring no more vain oblations. Incense is an abomination unto me. The new moons and Sabbaths, calling of assemblies, I cannot away with. It is iniquity, even the solemn meeting. Your new moons and your appointed feasts my soul hateth. They are a trouble unto me. I am weary to bear them. So this is the prophet Isaiah warning us once again to turn from this spiritual abomination, worshiping false gods, doing things that go against the commandments and the Most High. And we see that the people were keeping things, but they weren't keeping them purely. So here through his prophet, the Most High is telling us that, your oblations are vain. Your incense is an abomination, just like wasn't it Jesus who said that, you know, basically if you pray a prayer that goes against the order of things, and basically that prayer is like an abomination. Okay, so here through the prophet, you know, your incense is an abomination, your oblations are vain, you know, new moons and your Sabbaths. Now here it also says callings of assemblies and solemn meetings. So we know that we do solemn meeting, calling of assembly, holy convocation on Sabbath, weekly Sabbath. But in that same passage, it also says new moons, which, yes, the first day of the Feast of Trumpets is a solemn assembly, you know, is a holy convocation. But like I say, it seems that these new moons are standing out. Then the second verse says, your new moons and your appointed feasts my soul hateth. They are a trouble unto me. I am weary to bear them. So that wraps up all of the passages dealing with the past. And already we can see here in the past, the new moons appear to stand out. You know, the beginning of the month appears to stand out. And we know the beginning of the month lets us know, you know, or the new moon lets us know when a month begins, and therefore we can calculate a year, and we can calculate all of our seasons, and we can keep all of our feasts and all of our appointed times. So now let's go into the future with some prophets. We're going to stay in the book of Isaiah. Let's go to Isaiah 66. And I know people mentioned that they were familiar with this, but when we've laid out everything that's in the past, and when we tie it into the prophecy of the future, you know, if we did it once in the past, and we're going to do it once again in the kingdom of Christ, you know, the question I raise, what about the present? Shouldn't we maybe be doing it now? You know, where solemn meeting, keeping an assembly, no buying or selling, just like what's laid out for some other days. So, book of Isaiah, chapter 66. We're going to finish out this chapter. It's going to be 18 through 24. Book of Isaiah 66, 18 through 24. For I know their works and their thoughts. It shall come that I will gather all nations and tongues, and they shall come and see my glory. Now it says all nations and tongues. Okay, so all nations and tongues, that's not just physical hereditary Israelites, that's all people, because there's some people who like to say that only Israel can be saved. So we're going to knock that one out right here too. All nations and all tongues, because he's going to know your works. You'll prove yourself, you'll prove your faith by your works. And I will set a sign among them, and I will send them to escape of them the nations, to Tarshish, Pool, and Lud, that draw the bow, to Tubal, and to Javan, to the isles afar off. Now these are all the Gentiles that have not heard my fame, neither have seen my glory, and they shall declare my glory among the Gentiles. So if Israel can only be saved, then why is it talking about sending the glory and the teachings of the Lord to the Gentiles who have really not known him? And if the Gentiles who have really not known him need to be given proper teaching, then of the Gentiles who profess that they're followers of Christ, what are they following? What are they teaching? And what are they practicing? That's the question I like to ask in this passage. Let's go on to verse 20. And they shall bring all your brethren for an offering unto the Lord out of all nations upon horses. Once again, all nations, not just Israel. And in chariots and in litters, and upon mules and upon swift beasts, to my holy mountain Jerusalem, saith the Lord, as the children of Israel bring an offering in a clean vessel into the house of the Lord. And I will also take them for the priests and for Levites, saith the Lord. For as the new heavens and the new earth, which I will make, shall remain before me, saith the Lord. So shall your seed and your name remain. And it shall come to pass that from one moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. Now that's what this is talking about here. That the teaching will go out to the nations, even unto the Gentiles. That people will learn the truth. He's going to restore the Levites. He's going to restore the Levitical priesthood. Israel will be restored in the holy with the holy mountain Jerusalem. That Israel will offer a clean vessel unto the Lord, not be a cake unturned, not be lukewarm, not offer any abominations, or try to serve two masters in front of the Most High. A clean vessel. And this is the time of Jesus. This is the time of Christ. And Jerusalem will be the center of the world yet again when Jesus returns and he takes over control over all of the nations. And it shall come to pass that from one moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another. Now, if this one moon is simply only the feast, the first day of the memorial of the Feast of Trumpets, but it seems like not. So one Sabbath to another, that's every Sabbath, every weekly Sabbath, every week. And if the new moon is not simply talking about the first day of the Feast of Trumpets, then that's the beginning of your months. Just like it talked about in those passages in Numbers, that the beginning of the months will also be observed. And this is in the reign of Christ. So if it was done in the past, if it's going to be done in the future, at least as a remembrance and as a shadow of things to come, shouldn't we still be keeping it now to remind ourselves that this is the beginning of a new month, to remind ourselves of the passage of time as we go from month to month, week to week, day to day, year to year, new moon to new moon, Sabbath to Sabbath, as those signs in the heavens have been made for us. Okay, and then we're just going to go to the book of Ezekiel. This will be the last book. Let's do Ezekiel 45, verse 17 and 20. Ezekiel 45, verse 17 and 20. Ezekiel 45, verse 17 and 20, or 17 through 20. And it shall be the prince's part to give burnt offerings and meat offerings and drink offerings in the feasts and the new moons and in the Sabbaths and all the solemnities of the house of Israel. We shall prepare the sin offering and the meat offering and the burnt offering and the peace offerings to make reconciliation for the house of Israel. So here, once again, this is in Christ's kingdom. David will be the prince ruling over Jerusalem. Okay? And the Levitical priesthood is going to be reinstated. So here, when it talks about all of the different offerings, but also the feasts, new moons, Sabbaths, all of those solemn times, solemnities of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord, in the first month of the first day of the month, thou shalt take a young bullock without blemish, and cleanse the sanctuary. And the priest shall take the blood of the sin offering, and put it upon the house, put it upon the posts of the house, and upon the four corners of the settle of the altar, and upon the posts of the gate of the inner court. And so thou shalt do the seventh day of the month of every one that erreth, and for him that is simple, so shall ye reconcile the house. So here it says, in the first month and the first day. So that's the biblical New Year. That will be the godly biblical New Year that this will be done. And so thou shalt do the 7th day of the month for everyone at Aaron. So here we have a first day and a 7th day, and it's talking about the first month, you know, not the 7th month or any other month. Okay, so you see that consistency, like with feast days that have already been established, what will be done in Christ's kingdom. But it's, once again, it's specifying new moons, but also new moons were done in the past. Okay, and once again, I understand we don't do the sacrificial part. We don't have a Levitical priesthood right now. Christ is our high priest, but still, you know, it seems like these new moons stand out. And let me just read this one. Also, read a little bit more. Oh wait, actually, never mind, because that's Passover, so never mind. Okay, and then we're going to skip to chapter 46. Isaiah chapter 46, verse 1 through 3. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Ezekiel chapter 46. Ezekiel chapter 46, verse 1 through 3. Thus saith the Lord, the gate of the inner court that looketh toward the east shall be shut the 6 working days, but on the Sabbath it shall be open. And in the day of the new moon it shall be open. And the prince shall enter by the way of the porch of that gate, without, and shall stand by the posts of the gate, and the priest shall prepare his burnt offering and his peace offerings. And he shall worship at the threshold of the gate, then he shall go forth, but the gate shall not be shut until the evening. Likewise the people of the land shall worship at the door of the gate before the Lord in the Sabbaths and in the new moons. Okay, so once again, this is talking about the future. This is prophecy from the prophet Ezekiel. And it's talking about the Sabbaths and the new moon, that these will be appointed worship times, but we also have examples of this in the past. And let me also read, let's read verse 6 also. And in the day of the new moon it shall be a young bullock without blemish, and 6 lambs and a ram, they shall be without blemish. So when the Levitical priesthood gets reestablished again, that they'll also be making sacrifice in the new moon as well. So it just appears to myself and to a few other brothers that this new moon is something that was done in the past. It's something that will be done in the future in Christ's kingdom. So I would ask, based upon what's been laid out, we see examples of no buying and selling. We see examples of solemn meeting and a holy assembly, and we see an example of just an observance and a remembrance of what this means for how we got here, but more importantly, what it means for the future and where we would like to be headed. So the assembly, or the people I like to fellowship with, you know, we observe the new moon, we observe the beginning of a month, you know, and that's what we do. We don't buy or sell. commerce or mercantile affairs. We keep a solemn meeting, and we remember the passage of another month, the passage of time, the year that we're in, and we use it as a remembrance of what is to come for the future. So, with my discernment, that's what I would recommend for others to do, even though it's not specifically laid out in Leviticus, the 23rd chapter. So we'll just scan through Ezekiel real quick here just to make sure we're not missing anything. Real quick, I would just like to go back to Colossians chapter 2, verse 17. Colossians verse 2, verse 17. And I think this summarizes everything well enough. Which are a shadow of things to come, but the body is of Christ. Okay, so I feel that's the purpose of doing this. We remember the past. We remember where we are now. We think about the future, a shadow of things to come. But it's all for the body of Christ. And that body is of Christ. Okay? And that's what we should all be striving for. So, I just hope that this message is edifying, and I just wanted to lay this on the doorstep of the pastors and the leaders of congregations. And you could test this out and discern for yourself what you think that the matter is. I'm open to any feedback. There's a couple other passages, particularly dealing with David, but those were a little bit more inconclusive. In 1 Samuel and somewhere else I can't remember, but they were dealing with David. So I would just like for everyone just to consider what's been laid out here and test it. Pray about it, prayer and meditation. Pray that that the Lord gives us edification and discernment, that He sends His Spirit of truth, that we can, do what's best and do what's right according to the Lord, in the name of Jesus. So with that, I'll just finish this out, and we're going to be wrapping up the rest of the first day of Feast of Unleavened Bread. Just want to remind everyone, 7 days of leavened bread, of unleavened bread, and no eating anything with leaven in it, any leavened bread. So I thank everyone for listening.